In the vast, snow-covered expanse of the north, House Stark stood as a beacon of honor and unity. Their words, "Winter is coming," echoed not just as a warning of the cold, but as a testament to their resilience. Yet, in the shadows of loyalty, seeds of betrayal began to sprout. Eddard Stark, the stoic warden of the North, had always been the glue holding his family together. His departure to King's Landing as Hand of the King left a void in Winterfell. Robb, his eldest, took on the mantle of leadership, but the weight of responsibility bore heavily on his young shoulders. Sansa, ever the lady, found solace in tales of southern courts and dreamed of a life beyond the cold walls. Arya, wild and untamed, chafed against the expectations placed upon her. Bran's curiosity led him to explore the ancient secrets of Winterfell, while Rickon, too young to understand, sensed the growing tension. In King's Landing, Ned's unwavering sense of justice clashed with the city's intricate web of politics. His discovery of the truth about Cersei's children set off a chain of events that would lead to his downfall. As whispers of treason spread, Sansa, enamored by the court's splendor, found herself torn between her Stark heritage and her desire to be Queen. Arya, witnessing the treachery firsthand, began to understand the dangerous game being played. Her list of names grew, each representing a betrayal that cut deep. Robb's declaration as king in the North was both a rallying cry and a death knell. The North stood behind him, but the unity was fragile. The Karstarks, the Boltons, and other houses had their own ambitions. The Red Wedding, a massacre orchestrated by those who once pledged loyalty, shattered the Stark lineage. But what if the betrayal came from within? Imagine a scenario where Sansa, feeling abandoned and seeking power, aligns with Littlefinger earlier. Her knowledge of her family's movements becomes a valuable asset in the Game of Thrones. Arya, hardened by her experiences, begins to question the very concept of family loyalty. Jon Snow, upon learning of his true parentage, grapples with his identity. The revelation doesn't bring clarity, but further divides him from his siblings. The bond they once shared is now strained by secrets and lies. As the White Walkers march south, the Starks are no longer a united front. Each sibling, driven by personal motives, makes choices that inadvertently aid the enemy. Their individual quests for power, revenge, or identity blind them to the greater threat. In this alternate reality, the fall of House Stark isn't due to external forces, but internal fractures. The very values they held dear, honor, loyalty, family, become their undoing. Snow fell lightly over Winterfell as the cold winds whispered secrets no one dared to speak aloud. Robb Stark stood at the battlements, his eyes searching the horizon. The North had crowned him king, but every crown came with thorns. He felt the weight of every sword sworn to his name, but more than that, he felt the growing distance in the hearts of his kin. Sansa had changed. Since her time in King's Landing, something about her felt colder, more calculating. She smiled politely, spoke like a lady, but there was fire behind her calm eyes. She had spent too much time listening to Lord Baelish, whose words dripped with poison masked as honey. Sansa did not trust Robb's war. She believed he was too driven by pride and grief to see clearly. In quiet moments, she whispered with Littlefinger about alliances and futures that didn't include Robb on any throne. Meanwhile, Arya was still missing. Word of her survival had reached Winterfell, but nothing more. Robb hoped she was safe, but deep down, he feared what she might become. The North hardened all who lived there, but the South twisted them. If Arya returned, would she still be Arya, or something else entirely? Bran, changed by his fall and visions, spoke of things no one understood. He wandered the crypts alone and stared at ravens like they carried ancient truths. Robb loved him, but now he barely recognized his little brother. Bran had stopped speaking of the war or of family, as if he knew how it would all end already. Jon Snow, Robb's half-brother, was beyond the wall with the Night's Watch. Robb had trusted Jon like a true brother, but even that bond was uncertain. Now, letters came few and far between. The last one spoke of wildlings and a king beyond the wall, but Jon's tone had changed. He questioned duty, questioned blood, and above all questioned Ned Stark's legacy. If Jon ever learned the truth of his parentage, would he still fight for the Starks? Robb's own choices had begun to unravel the house. His marriage to Talisa, though born of love, had angered powerful allies. The phrase whispered of betrayal. The Karstarks eyed Robb's decisions with suspicion. The Boltons, quiet and calculating, said nothing, but in silence they schemed. In a darkened hall of Winterfell, Maester Luwin found a letter sealed with the sigil of House Arryn. Sansa had written to her aunt, whispering fears of Robb's rule. She spoke of how unsafe Winterfell had become, how perhaps the North needed wiser hands. She did not say the words outright, but the meaning was clear. She wanted protection, she wanted escape, and she would trade secrets to get it. Robb discovered the letter too late. At the same time, Arya made her return, not with joy, but with steel. No one saw her coming. She had changed. She walked with shadows and spoke little. Her eyes no longer belonged to a child. Arya looked at her family like strangers. She carried a list of names, and some of them now belonged to those she once loved. Robb embraced her, relieved. But Arya's heart was colder than the walls of Winterfell. She watched every move, every meeting, every whisper. She saw the shift. In Sansa's gaze, the tilt of her head when Robb spoke of battle plans. Arya did not trust her sister, and though Robb was her brother, even he was not beyond suspicion. She believed everyone capable of betrayal. Bran, now warging into wolves, and birds saw things that others missed. He warned Arya of what he saw in visions. One Stark would raise a sword against another, but Arya took that as a challenge. She sharpened needle at night, her fingers steady, her heart ready. She would not be caught unaware. The North was preparing for war with the South, but within Winterfell's walls, the real war had already begun. Each Stark carried their own secrets. Each had their own vision of justice, survival, or revenge. What once was a house united by honor was now a house divided by fear and ambition. At the heart of it all, Robb sat alone with Grey Wind, his direwolf, more loyal than any human. He whispered to the beast things he could not say to anyone else, that he feared Sansa's quiet rebellion, that he didn't know who Arya had become, that Bran was slipping into something neither living nor dead, and that Jon, his closest friend, might never return, or worse, return as an enemy. Grey Wind growled low, sensing danger. Robb did not know from which direction it would come, only that it would come from within. The North remembers, but sometimes it remembers pain more than love. The walls of Winterfell had stood for thousands of years, watching kings rise and fall, families forged and broken. But now, the cold inside the castle wasn't just from the wind. It came from the silence between siblings. It crept into the halls like a shadow with no name, wrapping itself around every glance, every whisper, every step. Arya watched Sansa with quiet eyes. She noticed the small things, how Sansa touched her necklace when lying, how she smiled only when others were watching, how her words were just polite enough to hide what she really meant. Arya didn't speak of her suspicions to anyone. She didn't need to. She had learned long ago that secrets were safer when kept in silence and resolved with steel. In the Godswood, Bran sat beneath the weirwood tree, its red leaves falling like drops of blood. He wasn't really Bran anymore. The visions came more often now, flashes of the past and future tangled together like roots under snow. He had seen Sansa handing a scroll to a raven, and he had seen Robb standing in a hall surrounded by traitors. He had seen Arya raise her blade against someone with her own blood, but the faces were blurred, as if the weirwood itself was unsure which betrayal would strike first. He tried to warn them in his own way, but neither Robb nor Arya listened the way they used to. Robb thought Bran had gone mad with dreams. Arya simply thought he had forgotten how to be human. In the great hall, Robb called a meeting. The Northern Lords sat in tense silence. Lord Bolton, ever quiet, studied Robb like a man studies prey before the final blow. Lady Mormont, fierce as ever, stood firmly behind him, but the room felt heavier than it should have. Sansa sat to the side, wrapped in furs and silence. Robb looked at her differently now. He wanted to trust her. She was his sister. But trust was fading. The message he intercepted from Littlefinger days ago still echoed in his mind. Sansa had written, "Winterfell may not be safe under my brother's rule." She hadn't denied it when confronted. She only said, "You don't understand what I've been through." He didn't. None of them did. Arya sat across the table, her fingers brushing Needle's hilt. She said little, but her presence was like a storm waiting to break. Robb tried to speak of the war against the South, of banners, of alliances, but no one heard him. They were too busy watching the cracks forming in the House of Stark. That night, Arya slipped through the castle halls, quiet as falling snow. She followed a servant carrying a message toward the rookery. The letter was addressed to Lord Baelish. She stopped the boy before he reached the Maester's tower. "Who gave you this?" she asked, her voice low but sharp. "The lady," he said, eyes wide. "Lady Sansa." Arya took the letter. She read it in the moonlight. Sansa had written of Robb's plans, of the troops moving south, of weaknesses. It was careful, wrapped in sweet words of concern, but the meaning was clear. Arya burned the letter, but something deeper burned inside her too. At dawn, she stood before Sansa in the Godswood. "Why did you send that letter?" Arya asked. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with fury held back. Sansa did not flinch. "Because I don't want to die for someone else's war," she said calmly. "You think I'm the enemy, Arya, but I'm trying to survive." Arya's eyes narrowed. "You'd trade your own blood for safety," Sansa's voice sharpened. "And you'd kill your own family to feel powerful." They stood there, the red leaves falling between them like silent witnesses. No blades were drawn, but the cut had already been made. The bond between them fractured. Bran sat watching through the eyes of a raven above, whispering the words neither of them would say. "The lone wolf dies, but the pack survives." But there was no pack anymore. Robb, unaware of the Godswood. Confrontation, prepared for war. He trusted fewer men now. He had Grey Wind by his side, but even the direwolf paced restlessly. There was something wrong in Winterfell, something deeper than politics or battle. There was betrayal in the blood. That evening word came of Jon Snow's return. He was riding with a small force from the wall. Robb was unsure whether to feel hope or fear. He remembered Jon as a brother, but now everything had changed. He was no longer just a bastard of Winterfell. Rumors had begun to spread of dragon, blood, and Targaryen fire. What would Jon choose, Stark or Targaryen? And more importantly, what would the rest of the family do when forced to choose between loyalty and survival? The cold grew heavier that night, and in the halls of Winterfell, the wolves no longer howled together, they hunted alone. The gates of Winterfell opened slowly as Jon Snow rode in under the dark grey sky. Snowflakes floated down like silent warnings. Behind him came a small group of trusted men from the Night's Watch, along with a few wildlings who had sworn their loyalty not to a crown, but to him. He didn't look like the Jon that had left. He was harder now. His face was cold, but not from the wind. His eyes held secrets no one could read. He rode past the familiar walls, but the feeling of home didn't. "Come!" Something in the air felt wrong, heavy. dangerous, Robb met him in the courtyard, arms open in welcome but not entirely at peace. They embraced, but both could feel the distance. They had once been like true brothers, but now they stood like kings from two different worlds. "You've grown colder," Robb said. Jon replied, "So has the world." Inside Winterfell the fire burned, but warmth was hard to find. Jon sat with the family, Robb, Sansa, Arya and Bran. The room was filled with old memories and new doubts. Sansa watched Jon carefully. She had heard the rumors that he was not really Ned Stark's son, that he might be a Targaryen, a dragon hidden in wolf's clothing. She didn't know if he was still one of them or something entirely different. And Sansa didn't trust things she couldn't control. Arya didn't speak much. She stared at Jon like a puzzle she couldn't solve. She saw the wear in his eyes, the weight he carried, the quiet power in him now. She wanted to believe in him. But she'd seen too many betrayals to follow blindly. Bran said only one thing during the meeting: "He has the blood of ice and fire." No one asked what that meant. They were too afraid to know. Later that night, Jon spoke alone with Robb. They walked the battlements like they used to when they were boys. But there was no laughter, no brotherhood now, only questions. "I heard whispers," Robb said, looking out over the snow, "that you're not who you thought you were." Jon nodded. "I'm not. I'm the son of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark, not Ned's bastard." Robb flinched slightly, but hid it well. "So, what does that make you?" Jon met his eyes. "It makes me someone with a claim to the throne. But I didn't come for crowns, Robb. I came to fight the real war. The dead are coming, and if we're not united, we're lost." Robb was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Can I trust you, Jon?" Jon answered, "I hope so. But I'm not sure we can trust everyone in this castle." And that was the truth. No one wanted to speak aloud. The next morning, a message arrived. Daenerys Targaryen was on her way north, bringing her army and her dragons. Sansa heard the news first. She said nothing, but the fire in her eyes grew darker. Another Targaryen. Another threat to the north. Another piece of power she could not control. Arya found Jon in the crypts later that day. They stood together in silence before Ned Stark's statue. Arya broke the quiet first. "Do you still feel like a Stark?" she asked. Jon looked at her. "I don't know. Do you?" Arya smiled bitterly. "I don't feel like anything anymore." She didn't say it, but Jon knew. Arya didn't trust anyone fully, not even him. That evening, Sansa met with Lord Glover and Lord Serwyn in secret. She spoke softly but firmly. "Jon is not our brother. He is a Targaryen, and now he brings a dragon queen to our doorstep. Do you want fire burning through the north again?" The lords looked uneasy, but they listened. The seeds were planted. Meanwhile, Robb was torn. He wanted to believe in Jon, but the north had bled for freedom, not to kneel to another southern ruler. He had fought too hard, lost too much. If Jon's return meant bending the knee to a Targaryen queen, what had it all been for? And yet Jon's words haunted him. The dead are coming. Far beyond the wall, the Night King marched south, and with him came the storm. But inside Winterfell, the true storm was already here. The wolves were circling. The fire was coming, and soon blood would fall like snow. The sky above Winterfell turned darker than usual, not because of snow, but because of shadows, shadows cast by wings. A distant roar echoed through the sky like thunder that had lost its patience. People rushed to the battlements, their eyes wide with fear and wonder. There, above the forest beyond the walls, flew a shape most northerners had only heard about in stories, a dragon, and behind it, another. Two beasts of fire and legend, cutting through the clouds like gods of old. Daenerys. A Targaryen had arrived. Jon stood at the gate as the dragon circled overhead. The men beside him looked uneasy. Even the direwolves of Winterfell kept low, sensing something unnatural. Then, through the snowstorm, the Queen of Dragons appeared on horseback. Her silver hair was hidden beneath a dark hood, but her presence was unmistakable. Her soldiers followed, unsullied, silent and deadly, and behind them the fierce Dothraki, riding like wind. Winterfell had never seen such an army. Robb stood beside Jon, his face a mixture of anger and confusion. He had not agreed to this. He had not called a queen to his home. The North had named him their king. And now another royal rode through his gates, not as a guest, but like a conqueror. Daenerys dismounted and approached Jon. She looked at him with something warm in her eyes, but she spoke to Robb first. "Thank you for your welcome, King, in the North," she said politely, "though I know it wasn't freely offered." Robb gave a sharp nod. "The North remembers. We don't kneel easily." Daenerys smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Then perhaps we can stand together," Arya watched from the shadows, her hand resting on her blade. She didn't trust this woman. Not her smile, not her dragons, and definitely not the way she looked at Jon. Sansa stood on the balcony above, arms crossed, her breath forming small clouds. She had feared this. A queen had come with fire in her, blood and soldiers at her back. This wasn't an alliance. It was the beginning of something worse. Later that night, the castle held a feast, but there was no joy. The music felt hollow. The warmth of the fire could not touch the cold in the air. The Northerners sat stiffly beside the foreign army. Daenerys sat beside Jon, speaking softly, trying to calm the tension. But the looks in the hall told a different story. Sansa did not join the feast. She sent a message instead, to the Vale. "The Dragon Queen is here," the letter read. "The wolves are outnumbered. Help will be needed." Arya slipped through the halls after the feast. She saw the way the Unsullied guarded Daenerys' room. She watched as Jon spoke with her alone in the gardens. She didn't hear the words, but she saw the way they looked at each other, like secrets waiting to be shared. Back in her room, Arya added another name to her list. It wasn't Daenerys, not yet. It was Jon. She didn't want it to be, but something inside her warned that trust, once broken, should never be blindly given. Again, Jon had once been her closest brother, but now he was loyal to someone else, and Arya had learned what happened when people you love chose power over family. Bran knew what was coming. His visions were no longer dreams, but pieces of time, unfolding like pages in a book already written. He saw fire in Winterfell. He saw a blade in the dark. He saw a crown in the snow. He told no one. Robb tried to meet with Jon the next day, alone. They stood in the courtyard as snow continued to fall around them. "You should have warned me," Robb said quietly. "I did," Jon replied. "You just didn't want to hear it. You're not the same, Jon. You fight like a Stark, speak like a Targaryen. Whose side are you on?" Jon looked him in the eye. "I'm on the side of the living, but I won't apologize for who I am." Robb's voice was cold. "Then don't expect the North to follow you." That was the moment the break became too wide to cross. The next morning, ravens flew in every direction, from Winterfell to the Vale, to White Harbor, and even to the Iron Islands. The North was gathering its strength. Not for war with the South, but for war within. The dragons rested beyond the walls, their breath steaming in the snow. Inside Winterfell, the fire burned lower. Trust had become a rare thing, and every Stark now stood on a different path. They had all come home, but home was no longer where the heart lived. It was where the knives waited. The cold in Winterfell had grown sharper, like it carried blades hidden inside the snow. The castle walls stood tall, but the people within them walked like ghosts. Conversations were shorter. Eyes lingered longer. Smiles had disappeared completely. Robb stood in the war room alone. The map of Westeros lay stretched before him, covered in carved tokens showing troop positions and banners. But none of it felt real anymore. Battles could be planned, wars could be won. But what do you do when the war is inside your own blood? He remembered when they were children, running through the snow, building snowmen, racing direwolves. There were no lies then, no crowns, just laughter. Now even silence had become dangerous. A knock echoed at the door. Arya stepped inside, her face unreadable. Robb tried to smile. "Sister," he said, "I need to know where your loyalty lies," Arya said plainly. Robb stiffened. "To the north, to House Stark." Arya took a step forward. "To the north. Or to Jon." Robb stared at her. "He's our brother." Arya shook her head. "He's not by blood, and not anymore." Robb didn't answer. Arya turned to leave, but paused at the door. "I won't let the North fall for someone else's crown. Not again." Robb watched her go. For a moment, he considered calling out to her, asking her to stay, to trust him. But he said nothing, because deep down, he wasn't sure if he could trust himself either. Elsewhere in the castle, Sansa received a raven. The message bore the seal of the Vale. Lord Robin Arryn had agreed to send forces under her command. Her plan was working. She told herself it was for the North. But a part of her, the part forged in Cersei's court and sharpened by Littlefinger's whispers, knew she wanted more than just protection. She wanted to rule. She met with Lord Glover that night, speaking quietly by the hearth. "Winterfell is no place for dragons," she said, "or false kings." Lord Glover nodded. "We've followed Starks for centuries, but if this Stark bows to fire and forgets the snow, then perhaps it's time for a new leader." Daenerys, for her part, knew she wasn't welcome. The cold stares, the guarded voices, the closed doors, she felt them all. Jon tried to keep her close, tried to protect her from the North's bitterness, but she wasn't blind. The Stark family did not want her here, and she didn't come to beg. She came to win. One evening, Bran summoned Jon to the Godswood. The trees whispered as if listening. "You're in danger," Bran said without looking at him. Jon frowned. "From who?" Bran's eyes were far away, lost in time. "From the people you love." Jon looked away. "They're just scared." Bran finally looked at him. "So were the Targaryens before they burned everything." Jon's heart sank. That night, Jon stood on the battlements. Ghost stood beside him, growling softly. Across the yard, Robb stood on the opposite wall. They didn't speak, but their eyes met in the dark. The next morning, a raven left Winterfell. A single black bird, cutting through the grey sky like a knife. Its message was simple: it has begun. That same day, Arya found Sansa speaking with a soldier near the armory. She waited for him to leave, then stepped from the shadows. "You've made your move," Arya said. Sansa turned slowly. "What move?" "The veil," Arya said. "The letters, the whispers, all of it." Sansa crossed her arms. "What I do is for the North." "No," Arya said, "it's for you." They stared at each other, both shaped by different roads, different scars, both daughters of Ned Stark, but no longer sisters in heart. Sansa's voice was sharp now. "You kill for the North. I plan for it." "And what if your plans lead to blood?" Sansa didn't blink. "Then it's the price we pay." Arya left without a word, but she was already thinking about what came next. Bran saw it all, ravens flying, blades being sharpened, armies moving closer. His visions came faster now, harder to control. He saw fire, but he also saw ice. He saw a face, Jon's, covered in snow and ash, and behind him a throne made of swords, melting. The future wasn't set, but it was burning. That night, a meeting was called in the Great Hall. Robb, Jon, Sansa, Arya, and Daenerys. No servants, no soldiers, just the wolves and the dragon. Jon stood in the center. "We need to speak the truth. All of it, before there's nothing left to save." Arya stepped forward. "Then start with who you are." He nodded. I'm Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar, but I was raised Stark. I am both, and I chose the North. Robb's voice was calm. Then prove it. Send her back. Daenerys stood beside Jon, her expression unreadable. I came to help fight the dead, she said. Not to steal crowns. Sansa laughed softly. But you'll take one if it's offered. Daenerys turned her gaze to her. You think power is a game, and you think it's your right, Sansa replied coldly. The silence that followed felt louder than 1,000 swords. Jon raised a hand. Enough, but it wasn't. Because in the cold stillness of that hall, something broke. The morning after the meeting in the Great Hall came with silence. Not peace, just the kind of silence that comes before a storm. Everyone felt it. Soldiers trained slower. Servants spoke in whispers, the wind that blew across Winterfell's. Courtyard sounded more like a warning than a breeze. Jon walked the walls with Ghost at his side. He watched the snow falling over his home, if he could still call it that. He had spoken the truth. He had tried to unite them. But now he saw the cracks more clearly than ever. He thought of his father, Ned Stark, who died for his honor. Would Jon do the same? Or would he die because his family couldn't forgive his bloodline? Inside the castle, Daenerys stared into the fire. She had always believed in destiny, in being the chosen one. But here in the cold north, destiny meant nothing. The people looked at her like she was a threat. The woman she loved most, Missandei, was gone. Her dragons were the only children she had, and even they seemed restless. She had come here for an alliance. But what she found was suspicion and frozen hearts. Sansa didn't hide her dislike anymore. That morning, she gathered with lords from the Vale and the North. Word had spread of Jon's true identity, and with every whisper his claim to power seemed more dangerous. We need a ruler who bleeds snow, she said, not fire. She didn't name herself. She didn't need to. Arya watched from the shadows. She always did. She had spent her life learning to read people, and now she read her sister like a book. Sansa had become strong, but cold. She believed she was doing the right thing. That made her dangerous. Arya didn't trust Daenerys either. Fire always consumed, but Arya had one rule that mattered more than anything: protect the pack. Even if the pack didn't know it needed protecting. Bran, in the Godswood, had stopped trying to warn them. The visions were clearer now, too clear. He saw Winterfell in flames. He saw the gates broken. He saw a figure walking through the snow, blood dripping from their sword. But no matter how many times he watched, the face changed. Sometimes it was Robb, sometimes Jon, sometimes Arya. He stopped looking. The first blood fell not during a battle, but a quiet moment. Jon met Robb in the crypts beneath Winterfell. They stood together before Ned's statue like they had when they were boys. This isn't how it was meant to be, Jon said. It never is, Robb replied. There was a long pause. You should have stayed dead, Robb said quietly. Jon turned. To him, stunned, Robb's voice shook. You came back with a new name, a new queen, and a war behind you. And now my people question me? I didn't ask for this, Jon replied. No, Robb said, but you accepted it. Jon stepped forward. I'm still your brother. But Robb pulled away. Not anymore. That same night, Arya followed. Sansa into the armory. She knew something was happening. New plans were being made. She crept behind her silently, like a ghost in her own home. She heard the words exchanged with a black-cloaked figure, one of the Vale's messengers. The Queen must not leave alive, Sansa whispered. Arya froze. Sansa wasn't just trying to protect the North anymore. She was preparing for war. Starting with Daenerys, Arya returned to her room, heart pounding. For the first time, she didn't know who to warn. If she told Jon, it would start a civil war. If she stayed silent, Daenerys would die, and so might Jon. But if she killed the messenger, it would only delay the inevitable. She chose something else. That evening, she met Jon in the Godswood. You're in danger, she told him. He nodded. I know. No, she said, not from the enemy.
From us.
Jon looked at her, pain flickering across his face. So it's true. Arya stepped forward. Sansa's already making moves. Robb is slipping. Bran sees things we don't understand. This family is cracking, Jon. And when it breaks, we're all going to bleed. Jon took a deep breath. Then we stop it. We remind them what it means to be Stark. Arya shook her head. It's too late for that. At dawn, a horn blew from the towers. Not for invaders, not for White Walkers, but for war. The Vale had entered Winterfell under banners of peace, but their soldiers moved with weapons drawn. Northern houses took sides, some with Robb, some with Sansa, and in the middle of it all Jon stood beside Daenerys, watching a battle about to begin not between kingdoms, but between kin. The first sword was drawn not by an enemy, but by a brother, and as the snow turned red, Winterfell became something it was never meant to be, a battlefield for its own blood. Winterfell burned, not with wildfire, not with dragonfire, but with the fire of betrayal. The sky was dark, not from smoke, but from falling snow so thick it covered bodies before they hit the ground. Steel clashed in the courtyards. Direwolves howled, their cries lost in the chaos. The House of Stark, once united by honor, was now torn apart by ambition. Robb led the northern forces who stood loyal to him. They fought with grim hearts, unsure whether they were defending their king or just his pride. Sansa's men from the Vale poured into the castle like a second storm, their armor shining with false peace. She stood behind them, watching everything from a tower window, her eyes cold and unreadable. She hadn't wanted blood, but she hadn't stopped it either. Arya moved through the chaos like a shadow. She didn't choose sides. She only moved to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Children, the maids, the old maester. She had seen too much death to glorify any of it, but her list had grown shorter now. And Jon stood at the heart of it all, torn between the past and the present. He tried to stop the fighting, shouted until his voice broke, but no one listened. He wasn't Jon Stark anymore. He was Aegon Targaryen, a threat, a symbol, a reason to pick up a sword. Beside him, Daenerys had had enough. "Burn the gate," she told her dragon. Jon stopped her. "No, you'll kill them." "They already chose death," she replied, her voice like iron. Jon turned to her fully. "They are my family." Daenerys looked into his eyes, searching for something, but all she found was distance. She stepped back. "You are not a Stark, not anymore." She walked away, leaving him alone. Above, the dragons roared but did not strike. Even they hesitated, sensing something sacred breaking beneath them. Robb reached the center courtyard just as Jon did. Snow fell between them, like it was trying to keep them apart one last time. "Stop this," Jon said. "It doesn't have to end like this." Robb raised his sword. "You were never meant to return, and you were never meant to forget who we are." They stood, brothers born under the same roof, now kings standing under different banners. Arya arrived, blood on her face, knife still in hand. "If you fight, there's no coming back." But they didn't listen. The first strike was Robb's. Jon parried. It wasn't a long fight, but it felt like the end of an age. Each movement carried memories, every block a broken promise. When it was over, Robb fell. Jon knelt beside him. "You were my brother." Robb's voice was fading. "Then why did it feel like you were always the storm?" He died before Jon could answer. Sansa watched from above. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She simply turned and walked away. Winterfell was quiet by nightfall. The fires had died down. The blood had frozen into the stone. Ravens flew from the towers, but not to call for help. They carried no messages. There was no one left to warn. Arya found Jon sitting by the heart tree. "You won," she said. "No." he whispered. We, all lost. Daenerys was gone by morning. She left no words, no flames, just silence. Her dragons flew east, vanishing into clouds. She had seen enough of the north. She had seen enough of men who said they were wolves, but tore each other apart like dogs. Sansa took the castle. With Robb gone and Arya refusing power, the lords had no one else. She became Lady of Winterfell, not crowned, not celebrated, just accepted. She ruled with logic, with cold precision. And with a memory that never let her forget the price of peace, Jon rode south, alone. He carried no banners. He spoke to no one. Some said he joined the Night's Watch again, though the Wall no longer needed watchers. Others said he sailed west, chasing ghosts across the sea. Most simply said he disappeared. Bran remained, quiet, still, watching. He spoke less and less. Time had little meaning to him now, but he remembered. He remembered the sound of snow falling on steel. He remembered the look in Arya's eyes the moment Jon struck Robb down. He remembered how a family could be broken not by swords, but by choices. Years passed. Winterfell healed. The walls were rebuilt. The people returned. The North survived, but something had changed. Children played in the yard, but they no longer spoke of the Starks as heroes. They spoke of them like legends, like warnings. Arya left eventually. No one knew where, only that she was still out there, still moving in shadows, still watching. Sansa ruled well. She brought peace, trade, order, but she never visited the crypts again, and the words carved above the gates of Winterfell remained the same. Winter is coming. Only now everyone in the North knew. Sometimes winter wears the face of the ones you love.